And when it comes to the order book for some of the manufacturers and the performance of the carriers, they don't necessarily seem to be perfectly aligned. Brendan, we're expecting to hear from Airbus next week at the Dubai Air Show. We're also going to be hearing from some of the Gulf carriers, like Emirates, for example, about how they are performing against this current backdrop of, I guess, global economic uncertainty, but also, in particular here in the Middle East, this backdrop of geopolitical uncertainty as well. How would you categorize the performance of Emirates right now, the world's largest long-haul airline? What are we seeing?
Well, I think the performance is still very strong. Obviously, they had a record year in their last fiscal year. Now we're going to see results soon for their first half, and similar to Singapore Airlines, which reported their fiscal first half results earlier this week. We're going to see more of the same thing. This particular summer season was very strong again. Almost as strong or as strong as the prior summer, the first summer after the full global reopening. So, but there's two stories here. One is kind of looking back at what has happened in the last half of the year, as well as since really the end of the pandemic, but also looking forward. It's a different story, really. Things are starting to tighten in terms of and weaken. From a demand perspective, there's a lot of supply chain challenges, the aircraft delivery challenges, the Pratt & Whitney challenges. But in the end of the day, even if supply doesn't go up as much as the airlines want it to go, if demand starts falling, we're going to see an end to the profits and an end to the kind of record yields and the record airfares. But it's hard to predict this. I don't think it's going to fall off the cliff. I think it's just going to be kind of maybe a slow decline over the next year or so. But it's really hard to predict given the geopolitical and economic uncertainties, not only in the Middle East, but really globally. We're just in a very uncertain environment. So if you're an airline CEO, it's not an easy period. They're working on budgets for next year, and it's really hard to predict, I would say.
Yeah, so the outlook for next year, perhaps not as bright, but as you say, the aviation recovery has been really strong and it's unlikely to fall off a cliff, per se. What about what we're seeing in Asia specifically, and with carriers like SIA? Are they also suffering perhaps a similar fate?
Yeah, so, again, record profits, for the first 6 months as well as the last fiscal year. So 18 months of really extraordinary market conditions. But the emphasis on extraordinary, meaning this is a one-off. This is not probably ever going to happen again, this kind of post-pandemic pent-up demand, revenge travel. And we all knew it was going to come to an end at some point. The question was when and how quickly, would it be a gradual or a sudden thing? I would say that it's probably more gradual than sudden, but again, there's a lot of geopolitical and economic uncertainties out there to really know for sure. And but the end is I think this is the beginning of the end. There are signs, even despite SIA's very strong results. If you look at like their yield, for example, it wasn't quite as strong as last summer. This summer wasn't quite as strong as last summer. Scoot yield was down. That's the budget carrier. There is weakness, particularly regionally, less so long haul, but regionally within Asia as competition intensifies, as maybe some impact of the economic situation, inflation and cost of living pressures, and the end of the revenge travel demand wave kind of begins. So we're at the beginning of the end of this, what I call like a honeymoon period, and a very unusual period particularly for airlines like SIA that benefited more than basically anyone else because they were so well prepared to bring back capacity in the market when borders reopened, due primarily to the government support and that they had during the pandemic compared to other airlines. But we're in a transition period right now. And next year is definitely uncertain and not so bright, but it's impossible to really know exactly how much it will fall, of course.